welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, Sue Perkins here, and as the Minute Wars fades away, what a joy to welcome you to Just a Minute. But first of all, let's introduce you to the four magnificent humans who are playing Just a Minute this week. They are Rachel Parris, Tony Hawks, Giles Brandreth and Jan Ravens. Please whoop and cheer for all four of them. It'll come as absolutely no surprise to even the most casual of listeners that I'm going to ask them to speak for 60 seconds on a topic I give them without hesitating, repeating or deviating. So let's see how that goes. And Rachel, we're going to start with you. And the subject is, if I were a wild animal. I'm looking forward to this. If I were a wild animal, what can you tell us about that in a minute, starting now?
If I were a wild animal, I would choose to be an urban fox. This is because I have seen them round the area where I live and they really seem to flourish. They can eat almost anything, it seems, including the entirety of our rubbish bin, and they can pleasingly defecate anywhere, particularly next to our roses in our front yard. They seem to have no natural...
Giles.
Third use of seam.
Yes, there was two seam and a seams, I think, but yes, it was a repetition. It's a correct challenge. I'm almost frightened to give you this topic, but under the rules I have to. If I were a wild animal, Giles, and your time starts now.
If I were a wild animal, undoubtedly I would be a kangaroo. The idea of hopping about everywhere is so exciting and exhilarating. Also, the promise of being in somebody's pouch, sitting in there like a pocket, and it's your mother, and she's nursing you forever as you bounce around the world. A kangaroo is the wild animal I would like...
Jan.
Repetition of the word kangaroo.
Oh!
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes, she is.
Yes, of course, Jan.
8 seconds, Jan. If I were a wild animal, starting now.
If I were a wild animal, I would like to be a tiger because that creature has the same markings as the male version, whereas...
Jan, you were speaking as the whistle went, which means you gain that all-important point. And Tony, we are with you next. I'd like you to opine on the marvel that is the Great Barrier Reef. What can you tell us about that marvellous structure in 60 seconds? Your time starts now.
The Great Barrier Reef, which is sponsored by Corals, is a huge place where all the sexy fish in the world go. The herring is in the English Channel, but the stripy fish, fish!
Rachel.
Repetition of fish.
Double fish. Yes, which means you get the subject.
Oh, God.
So, yes, I'm afraid. Yes, with interruptions come great responsibility.
Yes. I regret it.
The Great Barrier Reef, please. 42 seconds, starting now.
The Great Barrier Reef is somewhere where I would love to go because I do enjoy snorkeling and I would like to see some of the fish which are...
Jan.
I think there's a bit of hesitation.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, and we were going to learn so much, Jan.
I mean, there's the beginnings of a winding down, but Rachel's not played the game as much as other people here, and I also, partly because I really want to hear the rest. I know. I'm going to give you a point because I think it was a correct challenge, Jan, but at the same time, I'm going to give you the subject back, Rachel.
Oh, God!
So with 27 seconds remaining, it's all yours, Rachel.
There are yellow stripy ones, clown types, and many other diverse variants of that aquamarine creature.
That was worth it. Entirely worth. I feel totally vindicated. I really
It was going
that.
so well.
Really enjoyed it. Giles, you challenge.
I did challenge because of the hesitation.
Yes, all right. All right. And you'll get it. There you go. OK, 14 seconds remain to you on the Great Barrier Reef, and your time starts now.
If I were inclined to visit the Great Barrier Reef, it's where I would do my naked swimming. The idea of erotic...
thank God somebody buzzed.
Deviation! Deviant in the extreme to think of you naked swimming. How dare you bring that to people's minds when they're sitting there eating their tea?
Giles, I feel I should point out the coral is very sharp.
I mean, if you want to do that, knock yourself out, but I would like to send a documentary crew with you, if that's all right.
Just watch out for the aquamarine creatures there, Giles.
The clown types.
Oh, you know him, he's a bit of a clown type.
I never really thought about going until you described it, and I've never wanted to go anywhere more now.
I don't know how you could possibly object to the idea of a lovely naked body swimming.
It was your naked body in particular that jammed it.
Swimming freely. Just wait till the series is shown. It's called Subaquatic Naked Attraction, and it features people of all ages and types. There's a lot of diversity. Some of us are clown-like, some of us are stripy. As you'll discover.
Well, I enjoyed the challenge and I'll give you a point, but I do believe, Giles, as part of our remit to bring older people back into Radio 4, I'm going to let Giles carry on with the subject. 6 seconds, please, on the Great Barrier Reef. Your time starts now.
Speaking of those of riper years, Sir David Attenborough invited me to go on a holiday with him for some skinny dipping at the Great Barrier Reef.
Right, well, Giles was speaking as the whistle went, which means he gains the point. And we're with you, Jan. You might know how this is going to pan out, because your subject is a foregone conclusion. You've got 60 seconds on that subject, starting now.
It may seem to be a foregone conclusion that Tony Hawks is going to win this game because he is such a fierce competitor. He lingers over his buzzer in a very threatening manner and is always, look at that, the audience at home can't see, but anyone here in the radio theatre will know that he does not hesitate for a minute in his deviant, kind way to lurk.
Rachel, you challenged.
I thought there was hesitation.
There was a bit of hesitation and also 33 seconds of deviation, but I really enjoyed it, so I don't mind. Correct challenge. You get the subject. To remind you, it's a foregone conclusion. It'd be lovely to hear a bit about that. Starting now.
I was at the hairdressers recently and I requested something that I called a reverse balayage. The hairdresser...
Jan?
Hesitation.
Yes, because you thought there was a repetition of hairdresser, which it wasn't. It was hairdressers and hairdresser. And then you panicked and then you did indeed slightly hesitate. So, yeah, I'll give you that, Jan. It's back with you. A foregone conclusion. I think it's a foregone conclusion that you might well smash this in the 16 seconds remaining. We'll see. Your time starts now.
My son.
Tony.
I have to buzz now, or everything she said before was a lie.
And I enjoy the challenge and you get a point for it. But you do not get the subject, my friend. That's back with Jan. And 14 seconds remaining, starting now.
My son, Alfie Brown, is a stand-up comedian, and it always was a foregone conclusion that he would be so, because I have some
Tony.
Is that a hesitation?
It was a very
It
big
was.
hesitation.
Tony buzzed in with 2 seconds remaining. So the subject is yours, a foregone conclusion, Tony, starting now.
It's a foregone conclusion that I get a point.
Correct, you were speaking as the whistle went, which means you do indeed get that point. It was a foregone conclusion. Giles, you're next. Gosh, I'm sure you've got a lot to say on this. You've only got a minute, though. Your subject is Monopoly. What can you tell us about Monopoly, starting now?
As chance would have it, I do have a great deal to say on this subject because half a century or 50 years ago, I was the European Monopoly champion and took part in the world competition in New York. It was unfairly played because there they used the set of Monopoly in the...
Tony.
I'm afraid he's hesitating.
Yes.
Yes, he did. He's a little tripping there. 41 seconds on Monopoly. Tony, starting now.
I've got the just a minute version of Monopoly, which means every time you go past go, they buzz you for repetition, which is really annoying. Also, I'm wondering why there is only one company that makes the board game Monopoly. That seems almost wrong in many ways. I play it at home with myself because no one else wants to do this.
Rachel.
I was going to say hesitation because I thought there was some, but it was small.
It was small, but I sense that with the 17 seconds remaining, he might be running out of steam. So keep that thumb firmly on the buzzer, and we shall see what happens. Tony, 17 seconds starting now.
Seems not enough money, £200 for passing that particular corner area of the board these days.
Jan.
Repetition of passing.
Passing, go, and passing, yes. It's 11 seconds. Well spotted, Jan. So you've got Monopoly, and your time starts now.
There's always a fight at the beginning of a game of Monopoly to see who will be the shoe, who will be...
Giles.
Repetition of who will be.
Who will be, who
Yeah.
will be? Is it the shoe that draws you? It's the dog always for me.
Oh, the top hat for me.
Oh, God.
Of course!
And then that sad moment when you realise you already own Bond Street, I guess. A correct challenge, Giles. 2 seconds remaining, starting now.
Charles Darrow was the man who invented Monopoly.
Giles still speaking as the whistle went, means he gets the point, and that's the end of the round. Let's look at the scores. Oh, it is close. Oh, you're very tightly bunched. Rachel just in fourth, just ahead, Tony, and just ahead, Jan and Giles in joint pole position. Rachel, we're back with you again. Oh, I love this subject. Jarvis Cocker. I feel I should explain who he is to some of the Radio 4 audience. I'll let you do that. Can you speak without hesitating, repeating or deviating on the Britpop legend that is Jarvis Cocker? Your time starts now.
Jarvis Cocker is a wonderful, willowy character and real human being who fronts the band Pulp, of which I am a huge fan. They were big in the 90s and had some rivalry with other Britpop bands like Oasis and Blur. But to my mind, they... Oh!
Giles.
Hesitation.
Yeah.
Yes. Keep the finger on the buzzer. You
Yeah.
might well get it back. Although I know that Giles is bound to know a lot about the 90s Britpop scene. This could be a tough steal, my friend. Jarvis Cocker, 36 seconds, Giles. Your time starts now.
As a regular Radio 4 listener, on behalf of the rest of us, Alexa, who is Jarvis Cocker?
Rachel, you buzzed.
Deviation.
I'm going to give it to you. I mean, I think also there was going to be a hesitation. He just stopped. So there's a hesitation as well. So I'll give you that.
I was waiting for the answer.
And Rachel's going to give it to you in fulsome fashion. So with 30 seconds remaining, Rachel, Jarvis Cocker, your time starts now.
When I attempt to do an impression of Jarvis Cocker by reciting such lyrics as, "She came from Greece, she had a thirst for knowledge," I inevitably end up sounding like a drunk David Bowie. But in fact, those two people are very different.
Tony.
Another hesitation.
Little bit of hesitation.
Going so well.
11 seconds, Tony. You steal it. Jarvis Cocker. Your time starts now.
I want to sleep with common people was a line that he came out with. Never worked for me as a pickup line, I must admit.
Oh, Jan.
Line.
Yeah. So you get the subject with 4 seconds remaining. Jarvis Cocker, please, Jan, starting now.
My favourite Jarvis Cocker moment was when he mounted the stage at the Brits and wiggled.
Excellent work, Jan. You spoke as the whistle went, and you get that valuable point. And Tony, we are with you now. What do we have? We've got On My Tombstone. You have 60 seconds on My Tombstone, starting now.
It would be difficult to do better than Spike Milligan's suggestion, "I told you I was ill." But there are many others that people have thought of along the way. I suppose I might go for, as an atheist, I'm all dressed up and nowhere to go. That would be a possibility. But of course, I think a tombstone would be a bit of a waste of space. So I would use it as a table tennis practice area. The children would come along and whack the ping pong balls against my tombstone and get terribly good at the game and eventually play for Great Britain. That's assuming that's their nationality. If they were French, of course, they wouldn't. But that's an unnecessary detail, but very useful for filling out seconds, which I find you do need to do quite...
Rachel,
Deviation.
I'm going to give you that. On my tombstone. You've got 14 seconds, Rachel, starting now.
On my tombstone, I would put lots of pretty stickers like you do in children's craft books. I would have pink sparkly stars. I would have jolly little... Oh!
Yeah, Tony?
Yes.
Too many I would.
There are plenty I woulds. Yes, you get the subject back. With 2 seconds remaining, your time starts now.
And the German player was very good. He was hitting...
Right, Jan, let's see what we've got in store for you. Static electricity.
Ooh.
Your time starts now.
Static electricity was a big problem in the 1970s when I used to have lots of nylon in my wardrobe and as furnishings around the house. I had a nightie made of this fabric, the brushed variety, and as it rubbed up against my sheets, there would be sparks in the bed and I would prickle all over. And this was not deviant, I promise you. It was just the...
Giles.
Hesitation, but I want to return the subject to her. Because I'm enjoying this so much, and in my mind, there's a sudden fantasy I have of that wonderful actress, Patricia Routledge, playing Hyacinth Bouquet in this nightie. So if she agrees to carry on doing this as Hyacinth Bouquet, I will sacrifice the point and my legitimate challenge just to hear her doing it.
So you're petitioning me to make her do the remaining 27 seconds as Hyacinth Bouquet?
I'd like that as well.
I think the nation wants this.
I'll do it as Kitty from the Victoria.
Can I just say there's a procedure here? I know I don't roll with the cravat-wearing authoritarian legend status of Nicholas, but in my own way, I'm trying to run a show along the simple 3 rules upon which this game is based.
Oh, come on, so...
You got 27 seconds as Hyacinth Bouquet. Now, come on, let's have it. Starting now.
I should say that static electricity is a great problem in the home. And I always say, you need to get the electrician in, Richard. These tradesmen need to come to our home and fix this problem. And I will be very, very cross indeed. And I shall say to the
Giles, you challenged.
2 veris.
Yes. And I'm going to now ask that you complete the 4 seconds, Giles, also doing a Hyacinth Bouquet.
Well, you have to sort of, you know, have a bit of a sort of tongue in your cheek as you do it.
All right. Yes, I think the direction for Giles would be imagine a life outside London. Your time starts now.
Well, I can imagine, but not very successful.
Tony, you challenge.
Why is he doing Janet Street Porter?
You're right, it was a deviation from any known accent, and with 2 seconds remaining, and also, in the manner of Hyacinth Bouquet, Tony, I'd like to hear you talk about static electricity, starting now.
Oh, I've never had so many people.
Well, Tony was, I think it was Tony, speaking as the whistle went, who knows, gets that valuable point in what was a very enjoyable round. Giles, you're next. I'm sure you've got a tale to tell us here, because the lighthouse keeper is your subject. What can you tell us without hesitating, repeating or deviating on the lighthouse keeper? I've managed to make it sound sinister, it isn't. They do a very, very decent job in very punishing meteorological circumstances. The lighthouse keeper, 60 seconds, please, starting now.
The lighthouse keeper. I seem to recall an amusing verse about a lighthouse keeper. I enjoy limericks. There was a young man from Peru whose limerick stopped at line 2, but the lighthouse keeper is not one I'm familiar with. And yet, there he was, up his wonderful tall building, flashing away at the ships that came towards him, and then ended up on the rocks. An unfortunate end for the lighthouse keeper. Oh, it's about his daughter, the poem, now I recall. Yes, there once was a lighthouse keeper's daughter who didn't do what she oughta. And as a result, maybe I should try and do this as Sir John Gielgud. That might work better. Oh, there was a lighthouse keeper, and a very beautiful creature she was, too. How I loved her. Why is nobody interrupting? For a moment, I thought the programme had ended and something strange had happened.
Jan, the spell had to be broken, and you have broken it. Your challenge, yes.
I didn't buzz.
No, I buzzed.
No.
Well, the light for Jan came on. Once again, I feel that my authority crumbles yet further. And Tony, you seem keen to get the subject, so with 16 seconds remaining on the lighthouse keeper, you get it starting now.
I got the sack as a lighthouse keeper because it was getting towards Halloween and I thought all those trick-or-treaters would come round, so I turned the light out in order to think I wasn't there. There were several crashes that evening and I felt...
And at the end of that round, let's have a look at the scores. Narrowly in third place, we've got Rachel. In joint second, we've got Jan and Giles. And narrowly out ahead, Mr. Tony Hawks. And we begin round 3 with you, Rachel. And I know this is going to be a cracker for you. It's an Austen classic. Your subject is Pride and Prejudice.
Ooh.
We speak for 60 seconds without hesitating, repeating or deviating on Pride and Prejudice. And your time starts now.
Pride and Prejudice is an esteemed novel by one of my favourite authors, Jane Austen. It was that lady's first book to be published, and it was originally called First Impressions.
Giles.
First book to be published and first impressions.
Yes, actually correct, but you've killed the mood. I tell you, that was an absolute buzz killer. But anyway, on your own head be it, Giles. 44 seconds for that correct challenge you're left with. On Pride and Prejudice, your time starts now.
There have been several movie versions of Pride and Prejudice. My favourite was the 1940 film starring Sir Laurence Olivier, not that he had been knighted at that stage, and Greer Garson. It was made in Hollywood, therefore the accents weren't quite those that we would expect. They were mostly American, but nonetheless it had the romance and the humour that you want from this great masterpiece that is Pride and Prejudice. I've actually sat at the little table in Hampshire where Jane Austen herself wrote the last words of this fine novel that is, to me, undoubtedly the best of her beautiful books. Pride and Prejudice, I auditioned to play the part of Darcy when I was at school and was shocked to be offered the role of Mr. Collins. I didn't understand this at all because I felt I had the look.
Wonderfully, wonderfully done. And you're speaking as the whistle went. You get the point, and we're now moving sadly into the final round. I know, it breaks me too. And it's with you, Giles. There is no hurricane predicted for tonight, or is there? Because your subject is Michael Fish. Michael Fish. Can you speak for 60 seconds on Michael Fish? Your time starts now.
I can possibly speak for 60 seconds about Michael Fish because I knew the entire family. There was Albert Fish and Bertie Fish, Charlie Fish, then Desmond Fish, Enid Fish. She was the first girl.
Tony.
I want him to talk about Michael Fish.
It's true that there was a deviation, but I sort of feel that they were part of the family fish and that he was getting towards.
I was.
It's technically a correct challenge, but I will give the subject back to Giles with the understanding that Michael Fish needs to be mentioned sharpish. Time, 47 seconds remaining, starts now.
Sibling rivalry was the essence of understanding Michael Fish. It was because he had these problems with his brothers and sisters that when it came to telling what the weather was going to be like, he really couldn't do it. The man was employed for many years, but simply got it wrong. And that's the only reason that any of us remember him, which is a lesson to us all, Tony. Make more mistakes and people will recollect you. They'll know who you are. Don't be the smug bugger that you usually insist on being.
Jan.
Hesitation.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, good to see that Giles taking the show in the spirit in which it's intended. I'll give you that, yes, absolutely, hesitation. 20 seconds, Jan, on Michael Fish, starting now.
I well remember the night Michael Fish confidently predicted that there would be no bad weather that evening, and I was living in King's Cross. It was 1987, and even there were some trees.
Giles.
Even there, but I'm only interrupting because I would love to hear the rest of this in the manner of Janet Street Porter.
I think you're pushing it now, Giles.
I mean, Giles, at some point you have to refer things up the chain.
Forgive me.
I mean, who
Repetition.
on earth wants to hear 7 seconds of Janet Street Porter talking about Michael Fish? I do. And with that in mind, Jan/Janet, your time starts now.
There were so many trees blown down in 1987.
Giles.
Repetition of 1987.
Yes.
And I'm getting ready with my own impression.
What you can't see is Giles has woefully contorted his face. What I will say is, yes, Giles, you do get to speak on the subject as Janet Street Porter. You've got 0.5 seconds. Knock yourself out. Go on.
Michael Fish!
Giles channeling somebody otherworldly, and certainly not Janet Street Porter as the whistle went, gains that all-important point. So let's have those all-important final scores. Rachel just narrowly in 4th place, just ahead. We've got Jan. Just ahead of Jan, we've got Tony. And tonight's winner, Mr. Giles Brandreth. And there, ever so sadly, we have to leave you, but not before I have thanked the 4 impeccable players of tonight's game: Giles Brandreth, Jan Ravens, Rachel Parris and Tony Hawks. Of course, we are indebted to Ian Messiter, who devised this silly, infuriating game, and of course to our wonderful friend Nicholas Parsons, who chaired it so impeccably for over 50 glorious years. I'd also like to thank Caroline Barlow for blowing her whistle so delicately. The producer was Rajiv Karia, and this is a BBC Studios production. And this is me, Sue Perkins, saying thanks so much for listening, wherever you are. And please do join us next time we all play Just a Minute.